This is the DRS Sports Podcast. Don't forget to like, follow, and subscribe. I'm your host, Sheldon Alexander. Now, after a minor setback, we're here trying to bounce back after an 0-2 record on our last pod, but we're still clicking at 36-28 against the spread during the play-in/playoffs and a whopping 48-32-1 against the spread record overall for my NBA picks this season on this, the DRS Sports Podcast. Please remember to like and subscribe to our YouTube page so that you never miss out on our expert betting analysis. Last night's game, Celtics Heat. I mean, it was a 1-point game in the third quarter. And then the Celtics just took over, 24-2 run. They never looked back. The final score of 93-80 doesn't really do it justice in terms of, one, just how ugly of a game it was. And it wasn't really that close. Poor shooting. But either way, Celtics now lead the series 3-2 after a huge road win, which brings us to Friday night in Boston. Celtics favored by 9. I had to stare at that a couple times just to make sure. And I can't lie, like the series is a wrap, right? Like the Celtics, the series is over. Now, would I be out here advising someone and being like, hey, you should lay 9 points in game 6? Right. I mean, I can't come out here and strongly say that, but what I do here is I make picks. And if I'm forcing myself to make the pick, I am on the Celtics -9. The theme and trend of blowouts in these playoffs, especially the conference finals, I expect that to continue. And I don't know if the Heat say 1-2-3 Cancun or if they just say 1-2-3 welcome home to Miami, because hey, you could just stay there and enjoy yourself. But it's just too much for the Heat to overcome. Hero didn't play in the last game, so I don't know how he's going to magically be like fine all of a sudden in Friday's game. And he's obviously a massive part of their offense. Jimmy Butler, who is their MVP, he's super banged up. You're seeing him shoot multiple air balls. Like he just has no lift on his jump shot at all. He can't carry the load. Kyle Lowry is hobbling and is either like really washed or really hurt, but either way, it's not good. And Bam just isn't that guy. So when you add it all up for a team that is the sum of the parts, which is the Miami Heat, and you're mentioning their top 4 guys, I mean, no real superstar. So Jimmy hurt, Hero hurt, Lowry hurt, Bam not built. It's a wrap. I mean, the Celtics are banged up too, but they just have been getting more contributions from their depth than, as quickly as the Heat need to be sitting there relying on Max Strus, which when it's good, cool. Yeah. Like you can't really be relying on that as we've talked about for, the whole playoffs essentially. Yeah. Right? Like, the sooner you get to those type of dudes, you're in trouble.
Yeah, your boy Strus went full Reggie Bullock last night. not to bring up poor Reggie Bullock again after doing 20 minutes basically on Reggie Bullock, or the concept of Reggie Bullock. But you know what? On Monday we talked about the idea. Okay, 6.5 points is a lot for that game after the Heat had won that game. And I said, I'm like, you don't have to bet. Like you obviously, force yourself into making a pick here, right? Like you're looking for like a daily, game to game action type situation via the point spread. But, again, you don't have to bet the point spread in these games, right? And you can take the Celtics on the series price. You take them if you wanted to roll over a money line. We sort of talk about that concept and just go, okay, I don't know that the Celtics are going to cover 6.5 or not. I mean, we probably should have known that if they were going to win, they were going to cover, because in this edition of the NBA playoffs, if you win, you cover, right? So you don't have to bet the point spread, right? You can just bet the series price. And of course, it turns out that the Celtics cover that number. They cover the number last night, which ended up getting bet out to -3.5. So when it's sort of, you look at the point spread for this game 6 and it's -9, you just sort of sit back and you go, whoa, okay. Like we're up to -9. We were just at -6.5 a couple of days ago, but really the move happened before last night's game to get to -3.5. Because as you know, right, we do the quick home court flip and we go, okay, basically 6 points, right? 3 on one side, 3 on the other. Well, that gets you from 3.5 to 9.5, pretty quickly. Now, again, I don't know that the Heat are even getting a full 3 points. I mean, that place cleared out mega quick last night. I think it was still only like a 13-point game with like 4 minutes left, and there was basically nobody left in the crowd. So that's where that point spread flip comes from. It isn't from last night's game to game 6. It's from game 4 to game 5. Like, the market could see this coming. And obviously the difference between game 5 at -3.5 to games 1 and 2, you remember Heat -3, Heat -1 back in game 2, right? That's the change that has happened. So it happened before yesterday's game, and it turns out it was the right, move. Yeah. That being said, as you mentioned, right, they almost got to a fourth quarter where the game was close, but the third quarter of the game was still close, right? The Heat had the lead, if I'm not mistaken, at halftime. And so, like it is a lot of points, but, I think you're right. Like, the writing may be on the wall here for this Heat team. And again, it isn't necessarily their fault, because I don't think Jimmy Butler goes 4 of 18 if he's fully healthy or even remotely close to it, right? And of course, you mentioned the Tuckers, Lowrys, and whatnot, that there's only so much you're going to be able to get from those guys, even at the best of times, right? It's going to be a relatively inconsistent showing from that group. So, again, who said Celtics, we played this really, really well, right? We went Heat in game 1, then we came back on the Celtics to win the series in game 2, to win game 2. Remember, just think about it this way, right? Remember the sweet days of getting a Boston Celtics money line price at +140 for game 2. Like, that obviously never happening again, or certainly not in this series. So played it really well. We were able to press on the Celtics after that weird game 3. Admittedly, we could have more if we just kept banging away on the Celtics on the against the spread. But you know what? It just wasn't sort of worth it, given the fact that we had that second opportunity to hit the Celtics on the series price. So again, not over by any means, obviously in a literal sense, but feels a little, over. I would be really shocked if the Heat won outright in this game 6 on Friday. I think you're right. It's probably curtains. It's probably blouses for the Heat in game 6 here.
Yeah, like in Boston too, like that crowd on the brink of making the NBA Finals is going to be so fired up. Like, I just don't. I have a tough time seeing Miami winning that game, but it would be a
loss. I'm sorry. I was just going to say it would be a loss for the Celtics that is even more surprising than the money line would indicate, if you know what I mean, right? Like, I would be even more surprised by any generic sort of, +200, +300, +4. Like, it would even be more surprising than that, right? Again, I don't know that they cover, but I would be shocked if they lost that game.
Yeah, totally. And it's one of those things where you look at it and it's, shaping up as Celtics in 6. And it's funny. I remember in our preview, we talked about it and my gut was saying, okay, Heat in 7, but I need to see the series and see the matchups, because you could talk me into Celtics in 6 very easily. And the reason for that was you actually do need to see the matchups, right? And that's where the kind of game to game, sort of back and forth goes. And, just what happened in this series, I think it's like, there's a couple different factors. The Heat depth didn't hold up, but it's a little more fragile than Boston's, I'd say. But also Robert Williams completely just changes the impact of this series. Like, if he was able to play and be healthy the whole time, I don't know if Miami wins a game. Like, that's how drastically it changes what Miami's able to do. Because when he wasn't in the game, they're able to get 2s. They're able to drive into the paint and get 2s and mix up their offense. So that it's not just, okay, PJ Tucker corner 3, or Strus coming off a screen 3, or, whatever. You have some variation in their offense. And with Williams in there, there is no variation. It's just 3s. And you know what I'm going to say about that. Like, you're not going to consistently win like that unless you're Steph and Clay in that era of Warriors basketball. Like, it's just too difficult to do. Right. And you talk about guys like Robert Williams, like they just got all these contributors from like Robert Williams to, what's my guy's? I'm drawing a complete blank. Al Horford, pardon me. Wow.
Sure.
Al Horford had a monster series, and that's out of nowhere. Al Horford comes up and he just had like so many moments in this games. And Grant Williams also had great moments in this series. And You have so many guys. Pritchard had his moments. Marcus Smart had his moments. Whereas you look at Miami and it's like, if it wasn't Jimmy, I mean, Bam had one game.
It's like Robert Williams gives, and this is really simplistic, but it's like Robert Williams gives Bam Adebayo something to do. And that's going to detract from basically his overall game, because when Robert Williams isn't in there, then like Bam Adebayo can do whatever he wants, right? It's like he's giving him busy work essentially. Whereas like the numbers still look okay for Bam. I think he had a double last night. I think he had like 18 points, something along those lines, right?
But it's not as that. I'm not falling for that.
Right. But it's not, but it's not impactful, right? It's still like I'm out there doing like something, but it's not like I'm not having the run of the place, so to speak, right? Like Robert Williams makes him accountable on both ends of the court.
I had to look it up because I saw the tweet last night, but my guy Cuffs the Legend on Twitter sums this up perfectly. Says, some nights Bam looks like an all-star. Some nights he looks like JJ Hickson.
Yeah. And honestly, like if Robert Williams, again, whose numbers by comparison, they had the same amount of rebounds, whatever, like Robert Williams only had 6 points, but like he only took 2 shots. He's bringing the attention of Bam Adebayo in those, again, relatively minimal minutes, right? But those are really important minutes because there isn't a replacement, and you're allowing Horford to maybe play a little bit more on the outside. You're obviously just having 2 bigger bodies out there than the Celtics would normally bring, because honestly, like when your next best big man, I mean, I guess Grant Williams sort of qualifies, but like when the next best guy is, Daniel Tice, who's DNPCDing like these games, like if that's the case when they're fully healthy, and then there are games when he's playing like 20 minutes, like, I mean, that's not hard. That's not complicated, right? Like that's obviously not, that would obviously not be their choice.
Yeah. Just having the front line that is Horford and Williams going against Bam, essentially, who's the only true big on Miami that gets real minutes, right? Like Dedmon comes off the bench, but not really. And then you just have those two going at it. And it's like PJ Tucker's now fighting Tatum and having to hold down the paint and grab rebounds,
right?
Or Jimmy's having to drop 30 and having to hold down the paint and grab rebounds. Like it's just a different assignment for so many other people. And the depth factor just proved to be too much for Miami. And their wins came when there was no Robert Williams, or he was, hobbled.
Yeah. And I mean, who knows? Right? It seems to be game to game for him. But like even just something as simple as like, what if Al Horford was on the Heat, right? Because then that changes the dynamic. Sure. When, I mean, honestly, sometimes it's as simple, as much as we talk about like 3-pointers and all these and the variants and all that sort of thing. Like sometimes it is as simple when we're talking about shot creation and defensive shot, whatever the opposite of shot creation is for defensively. Sometimes it's as simple as like, you guys got 2 big guys who can play and you got 1.
Yeah.
And as long as that's a 2-to-1 situation, like your defense is going to be better and your offense is going to be better.
Yeah. Like, I mean, there's no actual stat to quantify the effect of Jimmy Butler having the ball, driving to the basket, and how hard or consistently he's going to be driving to the basket when Williams is there compared to when he's not there. Right. Like there's no, like you can look at like a shot chart, I guess. Right. Even still, like that's changing the mentality or like the nature of those shots regardless. Right. The shots.
I mean, that's as simple as field goal percentage, right? Like the 4 of 18, like I know that's like doesn't encompass everything that we would, ideally want to. And like maybe player efficiency is better in this case, but like, it's not a coincidence. It's not like he had open shots. Obviously he took 5 3-pointers out of those 18 shots. So there's 13 shots from inside the 3-point line that are being defended, obviously in a different way than they would be whenever Robert Williams is not in that game. Right. So it's not a coincidence, I don't think.
Yeah. Really interesting series for sure in the context of just seeing how important matchups are. Right. And just, you literally had games where the Celtics had everybody, and then they had games where there was no Marcus Smart. Then Marcus Smart was in, but Grant Williams was out. Like it was such a juggling act, like Al Horford having COVID or being on the COVID list in game 2. That seems so long ago now, right? But there's so much juggling. Game 1, maybe, whatever.
I think it was 1, right? It was 1.
It just seems so like long ago that there's been so many different iterations of the Celtics lineup and then the Heat lineup. So trying to figure out those matchups took longer than we might have thought. And yet we're still here with Celtics in 6. Right? Like, it's so funny how it works. So yeah, give me the Celtics -9 for sure. Yeah, that's just where it is. And, as we do like a pod twice a week and, people check in, they want to be like, I don't know what to bet on tonight. Let me see what's going on. Trying to give the people just a little something, right?